The old warrior had not spoken about Earth in 40 years. His name was Vorketh, and he had once been a commander in the Great Dominion Fleet. Now he was just an old alien with scars on his shell and nightmares that never stopped. He stood in a lecture hall on a space station far from his homeworld. Before him sat 300 young cadets. They were fresh and eager, their eyes bright with dreams of conquest. They knew nothing of real war. They knew nothing of humans. "You have asked me to speak about the Earth campaign," Vorketh said. His voice was rough like stones grinding together. "Your teachers want you to learn from history. But I warn you now. What I tell you today will not make you proud. It will make you afraid." The cadets shifted in their seats. Some of them smiled. They thought the old warrior was being dramatic. They would learn. Vorketh pressed a button, and a blue planet appeared on the screen behind him. It looked peaceful, beautiful, even. White clouds swirled over green and brown continents. Blue oceans sparkled in the light of a yellow sun. "This is Earth," he said. "Home world of the human species. 40 years ago, the Dominion sent 3,000 warships to conquer it. We had the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. We had weapons that could crack planets open. We had soldiers who had never lost a war." He paused and looked at the young faces before him. "We failed." A murmur ran through the crowd. The Dominion had conquered 47 species. They controlled 1,000 star systems. The idea that they could fail against a single primitive world seemed impossible. "I see your confusion," Vorketh continued. "I shared it once. Their weapons were primitive. Their ships were slow and weak. By every measure we used to judge a species, they were no threat to us." He touched his chest, where a long scar ran across his shell. "We were wrong. The invasion began on a spring morning, Earth time. The Dominion fleet appeared in the sky like a swarm of metal insects. Within hours, they had destroyed every human satellite and space station. Within days, they had bombed every major military base. Within weeks, the great cities of Earth were burning. Vorketh had commanded a ground force in a region the humans called Europe. His mission was simple: secure the area, eliminate resistance, and prepare for colonization. He had done this many times on other worlds. It usually took a few months. The human governments collapsed quickly, he explained. Their armies were shattered. Their communication systems were destroyed. Their leaders were dead or hiding. By every standard of warfare we had ever known, the war was over. He let the words hang in the air, but the humans did not surrender. This was the part that still haunted him, the part that made no sense to any species the Dominion had ever encountered. "You must understand something about conquest," Vorketh said. "When you destroy a species' ability to fight, they stop fighting. It is logical. It is rational. What is the point of resistance when resistance is impossible?" Every species we had conquered understood this. They submitted, and we ruled them. And life continued. He shook his head slowly. "Humans do not think this way. In the ruins of their cities, humans began to organize. Not armies. They had no armies left, but something else. Something the Dominion had never seen before. Farmers who had never held a weapon learned to make bombs from fertilizer and fuel. Teachers who had spent their lives in classrooms became leaders of fighting groups. Children too young to understand war carried messages through tunnels and sewers that the Dominion could not find. At first we thought it was just chaos," Vorketh said. "Random violence from a dying species. We increased our patrols. We made examples of those we caught. We showed them the price of resistance." His voice grew quieter. The attacks increased. Every night, Dominion soldiers died. They were killed by enemies they never saw. Ambushed on roads that seemed clear. Poisoned by food that seemed safe. Shot by snipers who vanished like ghosts. Vorketh lost 100 soldiers in his first month on Earth. He requested more troops. He received them. He lost them too. I reported to my superiors that we were facing an organized resistance, he told the cadets. They told me that was impossible. The human military was destroyed. There was no one left to organize. I was told to handle the problem or be replaced. He tried everything. He burned villages suspected of hiding fighters. He took hostages and executed them when attacks continued. He offered rewards for information. Nothing worked. I captured a human man one day, Vorketh remembered. He was old, a farmer. He had been caught planting explosives on a road my soldiers used. I asked him why he was fighting. His family was dead. His farm was destroyed. He had nothing left. Why not simply submit and live? The old alien's eyes grew distant. He looked at me with no fear at all, and he said, "Because you are here. As long as you are here, I will fight. When I die, my neighbor will fight. When he dies, his daughter will fight. You can kill all of us, but you cannot kill what we are." Vorketh had ordered the man executed. It was protocol. But the farmer's words stayed with him. They stayed with him still. I did not understand then. He told the cadets. I thought it was madness, a broken mind saying broken things. But I was wrong. That farmer spoke the truth of his entire species. Humans do not surrender. They cannot surrender. It is not in their nature. The young cadets were silent now. The smiles were gone from their faces. You want to know why Earth remains free? Vorketh said. You want to know why the Dominion, masters of 1,000 worlds, fled from a single blue planet? I will tell you, but first, you must understand what we faced. Not weapons, not tactics, something far more dangerous. He leaned forward. We faced a species that does not know when to quit. A species that will fight with sticks and stones when their guns are gone. A species that finds strength in suffering and hope in despair. We faced humans, and we were not prepared. He straightened up and looked at the screen. Where Earth still floated in peaceful blue, that is where my story begins. In the ruins of human cities, facing an enemy we could not understand. An enemy that should have been broken, but refused to break. An enemy that would teach us the true meaning of fear. The lecture hall was completely silent. Now, Vorketh said, let me tell you how they did it. The Dominion High Command held a meeting 6 months after the invasion began. The war should have been over. On every other conquered world, 6 months was enough time to establish complete control. Resistance movements died. Populations submitted. Order was restored. Earth was different. General Thaxor stood before the council, his 4 arms clasped behind his back. He was the supreme commander of the Earth campaign. And he was failing. The numbers on his report told a story he could not explain. We have lost 12,000 soldiers, he announced. Not to battles. Not to organized military action. To attacks from civilians. Farmers, workers, children. The council members exchanged glances. This was not possible. Their invasion force had numbered over 200,000 ground troops, supported by orbital weapons that could level mountains. How could civilians cause such losses? The humans have no central command, Thaxor continued. No supply lines we can cut. No leaders we can capture. They fight in small groups, sometimes alone. They attack and disappear. When we find them and kill them, others take their place. Council leader Vexnar leaned forward. She was ancient, her shell pale with age, but her mind was sharp as a blade. What do they want? She asked. Every species wants something. Offer them terms. Find what they will accept. Thaxor shook his head. We have tried. We offered peace. We offered autonomy under Dominion rule. We offered to rebuild their cities. They refused everything. Then what do they demand? They demand that we leave. Silence fell over the council chamber. The idea was absurd. The Dominion had never retreated from a conquest. To do so would show weakness. Other conquered species would see it. They might begin to hope. We cannot leave, Vexnar said firmly. Find another solution. Thaxor had a solution. He had been hesitant to suggest it, but now he had no choice. There is the Mindbreaker, he said. The Mindbreaker was the Dominion's most closely guarded secret. It was a signal, broadcast from orbital stations, that affected the brain chemistry of biological beings. It induced feelings of despair, hopelessness, and submission. Species exposed to the Mindbreaker lost their will to resist. They became passive, obedient. The device had ended resistance movements on 12 worlds. It had never failed. Use it, Vexnar ordered. And this. The Mindbreaker stations were deployed in orbit around Earth within a month. The signal began broadcasting on all frequencies, penetrating every corner of the planet. The effects were immediate. Vorketh remembered those days clearly. He told the cadets about them with a heavy voice. Human behavior changed, he said. We saw it in the cities we controlled. People stopped smiling. They moved slowly, like they were walking through deep water. Many stopped eating. Some simply sat in one place and did not move until they died. The suicide rate among humans increased dramatically. Families fell apart. Communities that had supported the resistance began to turn on each other. Fighters surrendered themselves to Dominion patrols, begging for the signal to stop. We thought we had won, Vorketh admitted. The reports from across the planet were the same. Human morale was collapsing. Resistance attacks decreased by 60% in the first month, by 70% in the second. But something strange happened in the third month. The attacks began to increase again. At first, Dominion commanders thought it was a statistical error. They rechecked their numbers. The numbers were correct. Resistance was growing. We did not understand, Vorketh said. The Mindbreaker was still active. The humans were still suffering from its effects. They were depressed, they were hopeless, and yet they were fighting harder than before. Vorketh was stationed in a ruined city called Paris when he saw his first proof of this impossible fact. His patrol had been ambushed by a group of human fighters. When the battle was over, 3 of his soldiers were dead, and they had captured 1 human alive. The prisoner was a young woman. She was thin from hunger. Her eyes had the dull, empty look that the Mindbreaker caused. She should have been broken. She should have been begging for mercy. Instead, she was smiling. I asked her how she could smile. Vorketh told the cadets. She was captured. She was going to die. Her people were losing. What could possibly make her happy? The woman had looked at him with those empty eyes that somehow still held fire. Because I killed 3 of you today, she said. Tomorrow, someone else will kill 3 more. And the day after that, and the day after that. You think you are winning because we are sad? You do not understand. Our sadness is not surrender. It is fuel. She had died in custody, refusing to give any information. But her words spread among the Dominion soldiers. They began to look at their prisoners differently. They began to see something that should not exist. Humans who were broken but still fighting. Humans who had no hope but still resisted. Humans who knew they would lose and refused to accept it. The Mindbreaker worked on their emotions, Vorketh explained. It made them feel despair. But we learned something terrible about humans that day. Their actions are not controlled by their feelings. They can feel hopeless and choose to fight anyway. They can feel despair and choose to resist anyway. Their will is separate from their emotions. This was not something the Dominion had ever encountered. Every other species they had conquered made decisions based on how they felt. When they felt hopeless, they gave up. It was logical. It was rational. Humans were neither logical nor rational. General Thaxor received reports from across the planet. The Mindbreaker was working. Humans were more depressed than ever, and the resistance was stronger than ever. He sent a desperate message to the High Council. The weapon is not working. Humans are fighting through the despair. Request immediate reinforcement and new strategy. The Council's response was simple. Increase the Mindbreaker's power. They did. The suicide rate among humans doubled. Entire communities died from despair. And still, every night, Dominion soldiers were killed. We made a mistake, Vorketh admitted to the cadets. We thought suffering would break them. We did not understand that humans are shaped by suffering. Their entire history is a story of survival through pain. They expect to suffer. They are built for it. The Mindbreaker continued broadcasting for 3 years. 3 years of artificial despair pumped into every human brain on the planet. 3 years of depression and hopelessness and grief. And at the end of those 3 years, the human resistance was stronger than it had ever been. We had created something we did not intend, Vorketh said. We had given them a common enemy. Something to hate. Something to blame. Their despair became rage. Their hopelessness became determination. We tried to break their spirits, and we only made them harder. The council finally ordered the mindbreaker deactivated. It was not helping. It was making things worse. But the damage was done. Not to the humans, to the Dominion soldiers who had watched an entire species suffer and still refused to bow. They had seen something that changed them forever. They had seen that some things cannot be broken. That was when the fear started, Vorketh said quietly. That was when our soldiers began to realize we were not fighting a normal enemy. We were fighting something else, something that did not follow the rules we understood. He looked at the young cadets, who sat in stunned silence. Something that would teach us what true strength really means. The interrogation center was cold and gray. Vorketh stood behind a one-way mirror, watching the prisoner in the room beyond. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she was the most dangerous human he had ever encountered. She did not look dangerous. She was small, with dark hair and tired eyes. Her clothes were torn. Her hands were thin from months of hunger. She had been captured leading a resistance cell in what remained of a city called Shanghai. The Dominion interrogators had been working on her for 3 days. They had used every technique they knew. Pain, drugs, psychological manipulation, the mindbreaker signal, focused directly on her brain at maximum intensity. She had not broken. Chief Interrogator Caxval entered the observation room, his scales pale with exhaustion. I do not understand this creature, he said to Vorketh. Her brain scans show complete despair. The mindbreaker is working perfectly. She should have no hope, no will, no reason to resist. And yet, he gestured at the mirror. Sarah Chen sat alone in the interrogation room. She was humming a song. Her foot tapped against the floor in a quiet rhythm. She is dying inside, Caxval continued. Our instruments confirm it. But some part of her refuses to acknowledge this. It is like she has two minds, one that feels and one that decides. And they do not agree. Vorketh had seen this before. The fighter in Paris, the old farmer. Humans who were broken in every way that mattered but continued to function as if they were not. Let me speak to her, Vorketh said. Caxval hesitated. Protocol said that commanders should not interact with prisoners. But protocol had not prepared them for humans. Very well, the interrogator said. But be careful. She is unsettling. Vorketh entered the interrogation room. Sarah Chen looked up at him. Her eyes were empty from the mindbreaker's effects, but somewhere behind that emptiness, something was watching, waiting. I am Commander Vorketh, he said, sitting across from her. I am not here to hurt you. I want to understand. Sarah Chen laughed. It was a strange sound, hollow but genuine. Understand what? She asked. How you do it. How your species does it. We have conquered 47 worlds. Every species we have met follows the same pattern. We destroy their power, and they submit. It is logical. It is the only reasonable response to overwhelming force. He leaned forward. But your species does not submit. We have destroyed your cities. We have killed millions of your people. We have broken your minds with technology you cannot resist. And still you fight. I need to know why. Sarah Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. You want to know our secret? Yes. There is no secret. You simply do not understand what we are. She shifted in her chair, chains rattling against the metal table. Your species evolved on a peaceful world, did it not? A stable climate. Few predators. Resources that were easy to find. That is why you became so logical. You never had to be anything else. Vorketh said nothing. She was correct. Earth is different. Sarah continued. Our planet has been trying to kill us since we first existed. Ice ages that froze the world. Plagues that wiped out half our population. Predators that saw us as food. And worst of all, each other. We spent most of our history at war with ourselves. She smiled. And there was no warmth in it. We are not designed for peace. We are designed for survival. And survival means never, ever giving up. Vorketh considered her words. They made a certain sense. But they did not explain everything. Other species have faced hardship, he said. They still submitted when they had no chance of victory. What makes humans different? Sarah Chen leaned back. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, thinking. Do you know what my grandmother survived? She finally asked. She was a child during a great war on our world. Her people were put in camps, starved, worked to death. Millions died. By every logical measure, they had no chance. No weapons, no allies, no power. Her eyes met his. They survived anyway. They held on to hope when hope made no sense. They helped each other when helping meant risking death. And when it was over, they rebuilt everything that had been destroyed. She leaned forward. That is what you do not understand. We have been through this before. Not invasion from the stars, but everything else. Genocide, slavery, wars that killed millions. Every generation of humans has faced something that should have destroyed us. Every generation has survived. Vorketh felt something cold move through him. Not understanding. Something else. Fear. You think you are the worst thing that has ever happened to us, Sarah said. You are not. You are just the latest thing. And we will survive you too. How can you be so certain? We have weapons you cannot match. Technology you cannot understand. We could destroy your entire planet. Yes, Sarah agreed. You could. And if you did, the last human alive would be spitting in your face as they died. That is who we are. That is what you are fighting. Vorketh sat in silence. The interrogation room felt smaller than before. I will tell you something else, Sarah continued. Something that will keep you awake at night. We have been preparing for you for centuries. What do you mean? Our stories, she said. Our fiction. For hundreds of years, we have been imagining this exact situation. Aliens invading Earth. Overwhelming force against a primitive species. And in every story, every book, every movie, we win. Not because we are stronger. Because we refuse to lose. She laughed again. And this time there was real joy in it. We have been training for you. Every human who has ever read a story about alien invasion has imagined what they would do, how they would fight, how they would resist. You came to our world thinking we would be surprised. We were not surprised. We were ready. Vorketh stood up abruptly. He needed to leave this room. He needed to think. Wait, Sarah said. I want to give you a gift. A piece of human wisdom. He stopped at the door. There is a saying among my people, she said. It is not the size of the dog in the fight. It is the size of the fight in the dog. You have the bigger ships, the better weapons, the logical certainty of victory. Her eyes burned with something the mindbreaker could not touch. But we have more fight. And in the end, that is all that matters. Vorketh left the interrogation center and did not return. That night, he requested a transfer away from Earth. His request was denied. The Dominion needed every experienced commander they had. The war continued. But Vorketh was never the same. He had looked into the eyes of a broken human and seen something that could not be broken. He had heard the truth of their species spoken in a cold, gray room, and he had begun to believe that they could not win. Sarah Chen died in custody a week later, never having given a single piece of useful information. The guards reported that she was singing when she died, the same song she had been humming when Vorketh first saw her. Years later, he would learn the name of that song. It was called, We Shall Overcome. He never forgot it. The war entered its 5th year, and something was wrong with the Dominion army. Vorketh first noticed it in the eyes of his soldiers. These were veterans who had conquered a dozen worlds. They had faced death many times and never flinched. But now, when they looked toward human territory, he saw something new in their expressions. Fear. The medical reports told a story that command refused to acknowledge. Soldiers were developing problems that had no physical cause. They could not sleep. They jumped at shadows. Some refused to leave their barracks. Others requested transfers to any other assignment, anywhere in the galaxy, as long as it was away from Earth. The humans had a word for this condition. They called it combat fatigue. The Dominion had never experienced it before. Their soldiers were trained from birth for war. They did not break, but Earth was breaking them. It was not the fighting, Vorketh explained to the cadets. We could handle fighting. It was the waiting, the knowing. Every day, we knew that somewhere, humans were watching us. Planning, preparing. We could not see them. We could not predict them. We could only wait for them to strike. The attacks had become almost artistic in their cruelty. Dominion soldiers would find their equipment sabotaged in ways that should have been impossible. Food supplies would be poisoned with chemicals that caused days of sickness but no death. Vehicles would explode at random moments, killing some soldiers and leaving others unharmed, never knowing if they would be next. The humans understood something about fear that the Dominion had never learned. Quick death was not frightening. It was the slow, constant threat of death that destroyed the mind. They studied us, Vorketh said. They learned our patrol routes. They learned our habits. They knew which soldiers were leaders and targeted them. They knew which soldiers were close friends and killed one to hurt the other. Every death was designed to cause maximum psychological damage. General Thaxor was replaced after the 4th year. His replacement, Admiral Kexra, arrived with fresh troops and fresh confidence. She had crushed rebellions on 7 worlds. She believed Earth would be no different. 6 months later, she requested retirement. Her reason was listed as health concerns. The truth was that she could no longer sleep without medication. And even then, she woke screaming from nightmares about human eyes watching from the darkness. The siege of Denver began in the 6th year of the war. Denver was a human city in a region called North America. Most of it had been destroyed in the initial invasion. What remained was a maze of broken buildings, collapsed tunnels, and rubble that stretched for miles in every direction. The human resistance had made it their stronghold. Intelligence suggested that fewer than 3,000 fighters were defending the city. The Dominion assembled a force of 50,000 soldiers, supported by air power and orbital bombardment. Command expected the siege to last 2 weeks. It lasted 18 months. Vorketh was part of the assault force. He would never forget what he experienced there. The city was a trap, he told the cadets. Every street, every building, every pile of rubble was designed to kill us. The humans had spent years preparing. They knew we would come. They were ready. The Dominion advanced slowly, taking casualties at every step. Buildings that looked empty would explode when soldiers entered. Streets that seemed clear would suddenly fill with gunfire from hidden positions. Underground tunnels allowed human fighters to appear behind Dominion lines, strike, and vanish before anyone could respond. We would take a block in the morning and lose it by night, Vorketh remembered. We would clear a building and find it reoccupied the next day. The humans moved through that city like ghosts. They knew every hiding place, every secret path, every way to appear and disappear without being seen. The Dominion brought in more troops. They brought in heavy weapons. They bombed entire districts into dust. Nothing worked. After 6 months, they had advanced less than 2 miles into the city. They had lost 15,000 soldiers. The humans had lost perhaps 500. That was when I saw something that changed me forever, Vorketh said quietly. His unit had captured a human position after a brutal fight. Among the dead defenders, they found an old woman. She must have been 70 years old, maybe older. Her hair was gray. Her hands were wrinkled. She had been carrying a rifle that looked older than she was, but that was not what shocked Vorketh. Beside her body, they found a small book. It was a journal. Vorketh had learned enough of the human language to read it. He sat in the ruins and read the words of a grandmother who had died fighting for her people. She had been a teacher before the war. She had grandchildren somewhere, maybe still alive, maybe not. She wrote about her garden, which she missed. She wrote about books she would never finish reading. She wrote about the sunrise, which she stopped to watch every morning because it might be her last. And she wrote about why she fought. They came to take our world, she had written. They came to make us submit. I am old. I will not live to see the end of this war, but I will not live on my knees. I would rather die standing than live bowing to those who think they have the right to rule us. Vorketh closed the journal. Around him, his soldiers were searching the position for useful intelligence. They found very little. The humans never left much behind, but they left their bodies, old and young, men and women. Fighters who had no training, no advanced weapons, no hope of victory. And they had died defending a pile of rubble that had no strategic value. That was when I understood, Vorketh told the cadets. We were not fighting an army. We were fighting a species. Every human was a soldier. Every home was a fortress. Every death was a message. The message was simple. We will never stop. The siege of Denver continued for another year. The Dominion eventually took the city. When they finally broke through the last human defenses, they found something waiting for them. The remaining fighters had gathered in a central plaza. There were fewer than 200 of them left. They were wounded, starving, out of ammunition. They had no chance of survival. They were singing. Vorketh did not recognize the song. It was slow and sad and somehow triumphant at the same time. The humans stood together, arms linked, and sang as the Dominion forces surrounded them. A young officer asked Vorketh what they should do. They will not surrender, Vorketh replied. They are telling us goodbye. The humans fought to the last person. Not one of them tried to run. Not one of them asked for mercy. They died on their feet, facing their enemies, singing until they could sing no more. The Dominion took Denver. They lost 40,000 soldiers to capture a ruined city defended by 3,000 fighters who had nothing but will. That night, Vorketh said, I looked at my troops, the veterans who had been with me for years, the young soldiers who had arrived full of confidence. I saw the same thing in all their eyes. He paused. They did not want to be there anymore. They did not want to fight. They wanted to go home and forget that humans existed. They wanted to wake up from this nightmare and never think about Earth again. Command declared Denver a victory. The official reports celebrated another step toward total conquest. But the soldiers who had been there knew the truth. They had won the battle and lost something far more important. They had lost the belief that they could win the war. The withdrawal order came in the 7th year of the war. Vorketh was in a temporary command center when the message arrived. He read it 3 times, not believing the words on the screen. After 7 years of fighting, 7 years of death, 7 years of failure, the Dominion High Council had finally admitted what every soldier on Earth already knew. They could not win. The official reason was strategic reallocation of resources. The Earth campaign was consuming too many ships, too many soldiers, too much equipment. Other sectors of the Dominion needed those resources. The war was not worth the cost, but Vorketh knew the real reason. He had seen it in the eyes of every soldier under his command. He had felt it in his own heart. They were afraid. The evacuation took 3 months. Dominion forces pulled back from every territory they had conquered. They loaded their equipment onto transport ships. They took their dead, those they could find, and left the ones they could not. The humans watched them go. They did not celebrate. They did not attack. They simply stood in the ruins of their world and watched their enemies leave. Vorketh was on one of the last ships to depart. As his transport rose into the sky, he looked down at the planet he had spent 7 years trying to conquer. It was still beautiful, still blue and green and full of life, still free. The High Council held an emergency session after the withdrawal. They needed to understand what had happened. How had the greatest military force in the galaxy been defeated by a primitive species that had barely reached space? They commissioned a study. The best scientists, psychologists, and military strategists in the Dominion were assigned to answer one question. What made humans different? The answer took 2 years to compile. When it was complete, the Council ordered it classified at the highest level. The truth was too dangerous to be known, but Vorketh had access to that report. He had earned that access through 7 years of service on Earth. And now, standing before the young cadets, he was finally going to share what it contained. The researchers began with human biology, he explained. They found nothing special. Humans are weaker than many species. Their senses are average. Their lifespans are short. By physical measures, they are unremarkable. He paused, but biology was not the answer. The answer was found in their minds, in their history, in the stories they tell their children. The researchers had studied human culture extensively. They read their books. They watched their entertainment. They analyzed their history. What they found was disturbing. Humans evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them, Vorketh said. But other species have survived harsh worlds. The difference was that humans survived together. They formed communities. They shared resources. They protected each other. This was not unique either. Many species cooperated for survival. The unique thing about humans, Vorketh continued, is what cooperation taught them. It taught them that individuals can sacrifice for the group. It taught them that the community is more important than any single life. It taught them that dying for something larger than yourself is not tragedy. It is honor. The researchers had found this concept in every human culture. The hero who gives their life to save others. The soldier who stays behind so their friends can escape. The parent who dies protecting their child. To humans, death is not the worst thing that can happen, Vorketh explained. Surrender is worse. Betraying your people is worse. Living without honor is worse. They would rather die standing than live kneeling. But there was more. The researchers found something else in human culture, Vorketh said. Something that explained why our psychological weapons failed. Something that made humans unique among every species we have ever encountered. He looked at the cadets. Humans tell stories about surviving impossible situations. Their history is full of moments when everything seemed lost, and they won anyway. Battles where they were outnumbered 10-1, disasters that should have destroyed them, empires that tried to erase them from existence. He gestured at the image of Earth still floating on the screen. Every human child grows up hearing these stories. They learn that impossible odds can be overcome. They learn that hope is not about probability. It is about choice. They learn that as long as one person keeps fighting, the fight is not over. The researchers had realized something terrifying. Humans had been training for the Dominion invasion for their entire existence as a species. Their fiction was full of alien invasions, Vorketh said. Hundreds of stories about beings from other worlds coming to conquer Earth. And in almost every story, humans won. Not because they were stronger, because they refused to give up. He shook his head slowly. We thought we were bringing them a new kind of war. We were wrong. They had imagined this war countless times. They had practiced it in their minds for generations. When we arrived, they were not surprised. They were prepared. The research report had a final conclusion, a recommendation for how the Dominion should deal with humans in the future. The recommendation was simple: do not. The report stated that humans cannot be conquered, Vorketh told the cadets. Their psychology makes traditional occupation impossible. Their culture turns defeat into motivation. Their stories teach them to fight forever. He straightened up, his old shell creaking with the effort. The Sol system has been classified as a quarantine zone. No Dominion ship is permitted to enter human space. No contact is allowed. We are told this is for strategic reasons. The truth is that we are afraid to go back. The cadets sat in complete silence. Their dreams of easy conquest were gone. In their place was something new. Understanding and fear. You asked me to tell you about the Earth campaign, Vorketh concluded. You wanted to learn from history. So here is what I learned in 7 years of fighting humans. He stepped closer to the front row of cadets. They are not the strongest species in the galaxy. They are not the smartest. They are not the most advanced. But they have something that we do not. Something that cannot be measured or analyzed or defeated. His voice dropped to nearly a whisper. They have the absolute, irrational, unshakable belief that they will never be beaten. Not won't be. Will never be. It is not hope as we understand it. It is certainty. They know, in their hearts, that no matter what happens, they will survive. And they will fight until that survival is achieved. He stepped back. That is why Earth is free. That is why veterans of the campaign are forbidden from active combat. That is why we do not speak of what happened there. And that is why, if we are wise, we will never return. He turned off the display. Earth disappeared from the screen. The humans have a saying, Vorketh said, preparing to leave. What does not kill us makes us stronger. We tried to kill them for 7 years. We failed. And now, they are stronger than ever. He walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. The researchers found a word in human languages that does not exist in ours. The word is indomitable. It means something that cannot be subdued, something that cannot be conquered, something that will never, ever yield. He looked back at the cadets one final time. That is what humans are. Indomitable. Remember that word. Remember what it means. And pray that they never decide to come looking for us. Commander Vorketh left the lecture hall and did not look back. Behind him, 300 young cadets sat in silence, thinking about a small blue planet and the impossible species that lived there. A species that had looked at the greatest military power in the galaxy and said no. A species that had suffered and bled and died for 7 years without ever considering surrender. A species that would still be there, on their little blue world, long after the Dominion was dust and memory. Humans, the ones who never gave up, the ones who never would.